The Jesters were a very active gang in Williamsburg in the late 1950s and early 1960s. They had a cast of characters that were, quite frankly, very dangerous. In fact, I consider the Jesters one of the most aggressive and violent gangs in all of New York City during this era. Now, there was another notorious gang from Williamsburg, and they were called the Phantom Lords. So stick around for today's story, where I briefly cover the Phantom Lords, the Jesters, and a teenager by the nickname of Crazy Tony. Chapter 1, Jesters and Phantom Lords. It was September 26, 1958, and Patrolman Thomas Cleary of the Brooklyn East Squad was on radio motor patrol in an unmarked car with his partner. The two patrolmen received information from a community center and from a youth board worker that a rumble was about to take place at Leonard and Siegel Streets in Williamsburg between the Jesters and Phantom Lords. Like any good patrolman, they scouted the general area and they were on high alert. And sure enough, at about 9 p.m., they observed about 40 teenagers at Leonard and Siegel Streets engaged in a rumble. The tip-offs they got were accurate. They pulled up to the youths in their unmarked car and everybody scattered. The two patrolmen immediately chased two of the gang members. After a one-block chase, Patrolman Cleary's partner caught a boy with a hatchet in his hand. Patrolman Cleary himself caught Crazy Tony with a 12-inch butcher knife in his hand. They put both of the boys into their radio patrol car and they continued to tour the neighborhood looking for more people to arrest. They picked up another boy who had a piece of pipe 3 feet in length. Then they picked up one more boy and he had a machete and a butcher knife in his hand. None of the defendants put up any resistance when arrested, and none of them were under the influence of alcohol or drugs. Crazy Tony, who was nabbed with the butcher knife in his hand, he denied having it. In fact, he gave a completely different story about what actually happened. He said that on the night of the gang rumble, he wasn't working, but he was helping the superintendent of his building. At about 8 p.m., he decided to go for a stroll, and while he was walking down Leonard Street, he saw a group of individuals fighting. And it was just at that moment that the police came up and arrested him. Crazy Tony absolutely denied he had any weapons in his possession or that the knife that the police took off him even belonged to him. He denied he was a member of a gang, and he had no idea that a gang fight was about to occur in the area that he just happened to be walking in. Crazy Tony might have been crazy, but he was crazy as a fox. Chapter 2. Who was Tony? Part of Tony's problem was that at no time in his life up to that point was he ever supervised. Apparently, no family member had the intelligence or the ability to help Tony channel his efforts properly. First of all, his parents weren't together. They separated in 1947 when Tony was 7 years old because of misunderstandings between them, whatever that means. Tony's father seemed to be a bit of a mystery, and when the probation department reached out to him after Tony's arrest, he was uncooperative and he didn't reply to them. A report said that Tony's mother abandoned the family and that his father detached himself from any relationship with his children. Thus, Tony was brought up in a cold, barren relationship with his parents. He had very deep feelings of resentment because of this. Children's Court said that Tony was a rather hostile youngster who related in a guarded, evasive, and suspicious manner. This resentment that Tony had spilled out in other areas of his life, one of them being school. He attended junior high school 50, where he was a menace to the other students. He carried tools in his pocket, and he instigated fights with the other students, and he would use these tools in these fights. Tony looked for the companionship of more aggressive boys and antisocial teenagers in his neighborhood, looking for prestige and recognition. And Tony found it. He joined the Jesters, and this was confirmed by a youth board worker who said that Tony was an active member in the gang. Now, Tony wasn't a leader, but he was rather a low-status member and a follower. He was known to his friends in the gang, as we know, Crazy Tony. And he did this because he was a wise guy and he just loved to show off. He tried to do crazy things in order to gain status in the gang. The Jesters hung out on Moore Street between Leonard and Manhattan Avenues, and also at the Sun Theater on Broadway near Leonard Street. Crazy Tony, however, denied associating with the Jesters or any other gang, but the facts, they're different. Tony refused to make an honest effort to find a job, and the youth board worker said that Tony, he was always hanging out with the gang. Now, actually, it's not true. Tony did admit that for 1 month he was a member of the Hellburners, another very notorious gang from Williamsburg. Chapter 3, Prison. Tony got a 3-year term to an upstate reformatory for his role in the fight and for carrying a weapon, the butcher knife. When he first entered the prison system, it was noted that he was lazy and given to brawling and associating with organized gangs in their extensive fights and warfare. When Tony was asked why he acted like a bandito, he sheepishly smiled, laughed, and said, "I don't know." Crazy Tony was sullen, and he had a bad temper when he was corrected. And although he had quite a few discipline infractions on the inside, he did surprisingly well in academics. In fact, his instructor said that Tony did an excellent job in all his schoolwork, and Tony actually got the second highest marks in his class. Crazy Tony entered the prison system on March 12, 1959, and he got out on parole on September 8, 1961. He didn't violate parole conditions, and that's the last we hear of Crazy Tony. And I wonder, when he got out, did he become regular Tony, or did he keep going by his nickname of Crazy Tony? In 1961, the Jesters were still around. In fact, they committed a murder in 1961. And I kind of wonder, did he go back to the gang? Or did he go straight? Now, if I were a betting man, I have a feeling that Tony was able to resist the temptation of joining the gang, and he made something of himself. Well, thank you very much for watching this video. I appreciate it. And if you're the relative of a Jester, there are still a few around, or a former Jester himself, feel free to contact me. I would love to hear from you. My contact info is at the very end of this video and in the video description below. Thanks, and have a great day.